أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين فاطر السماوات والأرضين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الأطيبين الأطهرين الهداة المهديين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have just a short time until iftar, but during this time that we have together, I would like us to look at the next surah in our series of discussions of the short surahs of the Quran, Suratul Inshiqaq. This is a brief chapter. It consists of a total of 25 verses. And like many of the other surahs that we have been discussing, it starts with a description of the events preceding the Day of Judgment. We mentioned during the discussion of Surah Al-Takwir that we shouldn't think of those events as being something that Allah is using to scare us. But it is an intrinsic part of the preparation for the Day of Judgment for us to realize that the heavens, the celestial bodies, things that seem to be so permanent, so stable, so real, their reality, their permanence is more an illusion than it is a reality. That realization, visually and also intellectually, is an important part for us to enter into the Day of Judgment and then move to a higher state of existence. In Surah Al-Inshiqaq, we have one other interesting aspect of that reality of the Day of Judgment that is mentioned to us. The surah says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انشَقَّتْ وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ وَإِذَا الْأَرْضُ مُدَّتْ وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ. So there are two series of events that are taking place. The sky will be torn asunder, will be torn apart. And then the Quran says that don't think that Allah is going to forcefully come to the heavens, the sky, and He's going to tear it apart. وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا. It's going to be a willing act. In other words, it's not as if the sky has a normal life that it wants to continue, and then Allah will radically change what is going to take place. But it will be willing on the part of the heavens that they will undergo that change. This is related to the earlier point, that this is preparation for us to understand the reality of the physical world. It's not worth investing all of our hopes and all of our efforts in. When the time comes for the end of its life, Allah will not even have to drag the heavens and the earth to come to the end of their life cycle. وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا. It's not out of fear. وَحُقَّتْ. And it was wajib, it was the haqq, it was required for the heavens to accept. If they had decided not to accept, then they would still come to the same end. So Allah is basically saying that this is something that is willing, voluntary, but even if it weren't voluntary, it would still come to the same result. And then, وَإِذَا الْأَرْضُ مُدَّتْ وَأَلْقَتْ مَا فِيهَا وَتَخَلَّتْ. And when the earth is extended, and it throws out whatever is in it, human beings that have been long buried, treasures, secrets. Sometimes when we have even figurative secrets, we say that we've buried them. We've buried the hatchet. We've buried our secrets. So all of those, they will come out into the open. The physical, the human, and our actions, our good and our bad deeds, all of that will be thrown out. وَتَخَلَّتْ. And then the earth will leave the people to their accounting. وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ. So as the earth is extended and flattened, and the mountains are destroyed, and the valleys are now brought up so the earth is flat. That is an image that is powerful in itself, but the same expression is repeated. وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ. That the earth also does this willingly. So this is an important point for us to realize, that as Muslims we have a certain conception of the movement of heavens and earth. And that conception is something that affects our ability to take decisions. If you look at many secular people, their impression is that human beings are just like animals. We're maybe a little bit cleverer. We might be more intellectually able to do certain things. We have opposable thumbs, and so we're able to make tools. We have language so we can communicate, and we have societies. But many people, they think of humanity as being basically animals. And if you talk to many people about sins, about different kinds of weaknesses that we as Muslims consider to be a very big deal, you'll find that in many non-religious people, there is not only a lack of sensitivity, but there is the assumption that it's natural, because in the end, we're all just animals. And so they kind of get that impression of what is humanly possible. How much willpower can we exercise with respect to our diet, our passions, our temptations, and how high can we aspire based on what exists within the animal kingdom. You'll sometimes actually see justifications for certain acts being natural because they exist within the animal kingdom. And this is something that we as Muslims, we oppose not just on a psychological level, not just on a spiritual level, but even on a physical level. We are created as part of the physical world, and yes, like animals, we are alive and we grow, and it is the same physical, chemical, genetic processes that govern our growth and development as govern the growth and development of the animals. But even within the animal kingdom, and even within what is beneath the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and even within what we call inanimate objects, there is purpose and there is direction, and there is willing submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for us as Muslims, the fact that we are part of the physical world, the fact that we are part of the animal kingdom, does not mean that morally we have any kind of limitation on our ability to aspire to perfect ourselves, to reunite with the highest elements within our soul, within our potential. The earth itself, the heavens themselves, they also are physical creations, but they submit to Allah. And these verses don't mean that this is just going to happen on the Day of Judgment. That Allah comes and says that this is going to happen anyway, and so because the Day of Judgment is a massive event, the heavens and the earth said that we'll submit, we'll come willingly. Sometimes we do that with maybe somebody we want to pressure. Political officials sometimes do that. They will offer a person the chance to resign before the person is fired. But not every resignation is a resignation, because the person might be told that if you don't resign, you're going to be fired. It's worse for you. So is this وَأَذِنَتْ لِرَبِّهَا وَحُقَّتْ something that is because the Day of Judgment is going to come? The earth says that, all right, I'll resign and I won't be fired. Well, we see in Surah Fussilat that Allah says that this is something that comes from the very day the heavens and the earth were created. ثُمَّ اسْتَوَىٰ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ وَهِيَ دُخَانٌ. That Allah turned to the heavens while it was still a cloud, still being fashioned, the very formation of heavens and the earth. فَقَالَ لَهَا وَلِلْأَرْضِ ائْتِيَا طَوْعًا أَوْ كَرْهًا. From the very beginning of creation, Allah said to heavens and earth, do you wish to come willingly, or do you wish to come by compulsion? ائْتِيَا طَوْعًا أَوْ كَرْهًا. قَالَتَا أَتَيْنَا طَائِعِينَ. The heavens and the earth said that we come willingly. And what's interesting is in that verse, the question is asked in Arabic in the dual form. ائْتِيَا طَوْعًا أَوْ كَرْهًا. the two of you, heaven and earth, the sky and the earth, do you wish to come willingly? And as-sama and al-ard, they reply on behalf of all of creation, atayna, not ta'i'ain, which is the dual form, but ta'i'een. All of us, we come willingly, meaning all of creation, animate and inanimate objects. So that is within the very fiber and the very essence of creation, to submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I fall prey to temptation, and I say I'm going to sin, I'm going against my fitrah and my nature. It might be very tempting. And sometimes it's very difficult for us to say no. And we succumb. And then we have to repent. But it makes a very big difference in my eventual spiritual path to realize that natural is to go towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the natural path of my creation and the creation of heavens and earth. As compared for me to say that I have to force myself, I have to compel myself, eventually I'm going to succumb anyway, so why not just give in to sin right now? So that is a change that Allah wants to bring about in our conception of our spiritual path. Now, the Quran says here in Surah Inshiqaq, يَا أَيُّهَا الْإِنسَانِ إِنَّكَ كَادِحٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ كَدْحًا فَمُلَاقِيهِ that, O human beings, you are كَادِحٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ كَدْحًا فَمُلَاقِيهِ. You are struggling and moving towards your Lord, willingly or unwillingly. That is the natural direction of your motion. You're going towards your Creator, and you're going to meet your Creator. So that's something that we can't say is a possibility. It is definitive. There are two possibilities that will result. One is, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ بِيَمِينِهِ. There are some people who will be given their book of deeds in their right hand. And then the Quran says, فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا. That person will be held to an easy account. Now, the Prophet, according to a hadith of our fifth Imam, our Prophet was asked about this verse. Because the Prophet has a hadith where he says, كُلُّ مُحَاسَبٍ مُعَذَّبٍ. Everyone who is going to be held to account is going to be punished. None of us has ever fully acquitted ourselves of what we should have done. With our time, with our intentions, with our resources, with our families. Anything that we have been entrusted with, no one can say that I have fully fulfilled all of the obligations that I owe to my children. I have fully acquitted myself of the obligations I owe to my parents. I've used my time in the best possible way. I've used the intellect Allah gave me in the best possible way. كُلُّ مُحَاسَبٍ مُعَذَّبٍ. Everyone who is going to be held to account will be punished. And so people came to the Prophet, they said, فَسَوْفَ يُحَاسَبُ حِسَابًا يَسِيرًا. What about this? That they will be held to an easy account. And the Prophet said that they're not actually going to be held to an account. ذَلِكَ الْعَرْض. They will just be told of their actions. There is not going to be an accounting. If we have hisab, then we have always a debt that will become known and become visible. So what is that ard? Another hadith describes it. That Allah will say that these are your hasanat and you deserve thawab for your hasanat. And as for the sayyi'at, the person will be forgiven of them. And one hadith describes the process of forgiveness. He says that there will be a hisab, but it will be individually. Allah will call that person not in front of everyone else, but just individually. That person will be called and say, O servant, did you do these acts? And the servant will admit to Allah that, yes, I did. This was a mistake that I committed. And then Allah will say, that is between me and you. I have forgiven you and I have turned them into hasanat. And then the person will be held to the public accounting. And in that public accounting, that hisaban yasiran will show up. Only the good deeds will show. And then others will say that, how is it possible for this person who we saw in the world not to have any sins? It will be because that public accounting will be an easy, a lenient accounting. So these are the ahadith to describe what is hisab yasir. The definition here though is Ashabul Yameen. That is what we have to be in. In Surah Waqi'ah and in other surahs, Ashabul Yameen are discussed. So the attributes that make a person to be Ashabul Yameen are going to be important for us, because that is what allows us to have that easy account. Very briefly, if you want to summarize Ashabul Yameen in just one word or one phrase, it is Shi'atu Ali ibn Abi Talib. The Prophet is reported to have said in a hadith, Ya Ali hum Shi'atuk. They are your Shia. They will be Ashabul Yameen. Then the Quran says, وَيَنْقَلِبُ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. Such people will return to their family happy. They will return in a pleased state. And the Quran describes this as being in contrast with the state of those people who chase happiness in this world. So there are others who أَمَّا مَنْ أُوتِيَ كِتَابَهُ وَرَاءَ ظَهْرِهِ. There's some people whose book will be given to them behind their back. فَسَوْفَ يَدْعُو ثُبُورًا وَيَصْلَى سَعِيرًا إِنَّهُ كَانَ فِي أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. That person was happy in his own people, family, friends. That person will be unhappy on the Day of Judgment. So this value system that we have, sometimes fed to us and we don't think about, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The life part is good, because Allah is calling us to مَا يُحْيِيكُمْ, what gives you life. But liberty, actually what we're asking for is to be a slave. Our greatest accomplishment is to be Abdullah, Amatullah, to be a slave or a maid of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is liberty from everything within creation. But that liberty comes from submitting and becoming a slave to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes always looking for freedom is not a good idea. Being a slave of Allah is true liberty, because it sets you free from any idols and any kind of false worship and any kind of servitude to something that is not worthy of servitude. But the desire to always be free, to have a choice, to always keep our options open, it's what prevents people from getting married on time. It's what prevents people from ever signing up to fulfill a responsibility, from trying to... No, don't look for liberty. Look for being a servant of Allah and free of false gods. And then serve Allah, even if it means that you put restrictions and accept responsibilities on yourself. And then pursuit of happiness. Servitude to Allah means that you don't pursue happiness. You pursue your duty, and happiness will come. And there are studies that we don't have time to talk about that do bear that out. That people who live a life of purpose are actually happier than people who live a life pursuing happiness. Because the pursuit of happiness often can give you an emptiness if you don't have a higher purpose in your life. And the Quran very beautifully draws that distinction, that a person who has purpose, يَنْقَلِبُ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهِ مَسْرُورًا. They will return to their family pleased. But those who do not, they will be happy in this world, and it will be a transitory happiness. We are out of time, but that relates very beautifully to the events of Karbala. There are trials that are beyond our imagination. And the trials of Ahlul Bayt in Karbala are beyond our conception, beyond our imagination. And yet they were all offered a choice by Imam Hussein to leave. And the Imam said, not just to his companions, but also for his family, he said that to the sons of Aqil, Muslim ibn Aqil has given a shahada that is worthy of an entire tribe. You can go. And they said that we would not go. To his companions, he said that if you wish to go, then take the hand of one of my family members, so you won't even feel guilty that you abandoned your Imam. You can feel honor that you saved one of the descendants of the Prophet. The Imam gave all of them a choice. And they said that we will remain, because there is nowhere that we would rather be than where we are. There is nothing that we would rather do than what we will do in service of Islam on the battlefield. And there is no one whom we would rather give our life for, since life is going to come to an end, than for the grandson of the Messenger of Allah. That was the spirit with which the martyrs of Karbala, they gave their lives and they spent their final moments. But out of that spirit of martyrdom, one example that shines out to us is that spirit of sacrifice in the son of our Imam Zainul Abidin, who was not a martyr of Karbala. But I can say that if there were martyrs who were martyred once in Karbala, then Imam Zainul Abidin was martyred 72 times in just a short space. When Imam Hussein comes to his tent after bidding farewell to his family, and he rouses his son who was ill and only semi-conscious at that time, and he says that, "Oh, my son, I have come to bid farewell to you." And when Imam Zainul Abidin opens his eyes, he sees that his father has aged in just a few hours more than he can imagine. He seems to be more bent, more old, with whiter hairs and more wrinkled skin. He said that, "Father, where is my uncle Abbas? Where is my brother Ali Akbar? Where are all of those who would make sure that you would never be alone wherever you may go?" And one by one, as Imam Zainul Abidin would ask about his relatives, about the Shia and the followers of the Imam would lower his gaze and shed tears and say, "Oh my son, they have gone forth to meet their Creator. They have gone to their eternal abode." Finally, Imam Zainul Abidin began to ask, not just about the warriors, but about those who were younger. He said, "Oh my father, if you are going to tell me that all have achieved martyrdom, then tell me, is at least my cousin Qasim safe? Are my cousins Aoun and Muhammad safe?" And still the Imam said that all of them have been martyred. And before Imam Zainul Abidin could ask, the Imam said that, "Let me tell you, there is nobody but you and me who are alive." And at that point, the spirit of martyrdom from an Imam who cannot even stand, he says that, "Oh my Aunt Zainab, bring me a cane and bring me a sword." And the Imam said that, "Oh my son, what are you going to do?" He said, "Father, if I cannot stand, then I will lean on the cane and I will hold the sword. You are the only living grandson of a messenger of God on the face of the earth. How can I lie in my tent while you are surrounded by your enemies?" And the Imam said that, "Oh my son, there is a struggle that you are going to have to undergo that is even more painful and more difficult than my jihad and my struggle. I bid farewell to you," and then the Imam hugged his son. And I don't know how long it was that they held each other in their embrace. But when they left, it was as if the Imam had left his soul with his son Zainul Abidin, and the soul of Zainul Abidin was departing to the battlefield with his father. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I ask all of you to remember your own marhumeen, the marhumeen of the sponsors of tonight's majlis, and in particular marhum Sayyid Rais Hasan Zaidi wa Sayyid Tajammul Hasan Zaidi, with a Surah Fatiha. تسبقها الصلوات على محمد وآل محمد.